Hello, and welcome to Literacy Works Volunteer Management, Recruitment, and Retention webinar. To get the most from today's webinar experience, it's a good idea to print out a copy of the handouts that we've provided for you so that you have them in front of you as we work through the webinar. In addition, it's a really good idea to have pen and paper in front of you. There will be interactive moments of this webinar when I'll ask you to pause at key points, stop, reflect, take some notes, and then start the webinar back up again. So it's a good idea to have all of these things in front of you as you go. If you don't have the handouts or pen or paper, pause this and come back when you're ready. Okay. So this is the Literacy Works Volunteer Management, Recruitment, and Retention webinar. This is really a compilation of all of the recruitment and retention strategies that we've seen in the field for the last 20 years. These are really the best practices that we've seen from you guys, the literacy coordinators who are out working, and we've compiled them all into this webinar. So we want to share some of these things with you. My name is Lindsay Crammond. I am the program director with Literacy Works. I've been in the adult education field for about 10 years. I have experience as an instructor, a Literacy Works trainer, as well as a volunteer coordinator. So today, we're going to talk about 4 aspects of volunteer management. We're going to start by thinking about volunteer motivation. So what makes our volunteers want to be with us at our agencies? We're then going to move on to some best practices in tutor recruitment, as well as some retention practices. And then we'll finish up today with the role of the volunteer coordinator. So volunteer motivation. What motivates our volunteers? What brings them to our agency? So I want to take a look at your handouts. You'll see on page 1 that I've posed a question for you. Why do people volunteer? What makes our volunteers come to now? If you think you need a little bit more time, feel free to pause the webinar and just jot down some ideas on your handouts. Okay, if you need more time, you can pause now. If not, let's talk about some of the reasons that we think that volunteers come to us. So at Literacy Works, we think that there are really 3 different motivations for our volunteers. So we have some volunteers who we believe come for really personal or social reasons. So you may have written down things like, my volunteers come because they want to gain new experiences, because they want to help people in their community. Maybe because they're new to the neighborhood and they want to meet some people and make new friends. All of these we think are really sort of this personal social. Other volunteers, we believe, come to us because they want to gain new skills, because they want to get some experience on their resume. Perhaps they're looking into teaching abroad, into getting into nonprofits. Maybe they want to work in adult education or social service. And so these volunteers we like to think of as volunteers, folks who want to tutor, who want to work with adult learners because they have some kind of career aspiration. And then finally, the third type of volunteer, we think community cause volunteer. So this is an individual who's really driven by social justice, who's really driven by the idea that they want to better their community. That they believe every adult should be able to read and write. And so these are folks who are sort of driven by an ideal of adult literacy. Now, as a tutor coordinator, it's really important that you can listen to and respond to these types of motivations. So before we move on and kind of unpack and explore a little more these 3 types of volunteers, I just want to pose this question to you, and I want you to be thinking about this throughout the webinar. How can you listen to and respond to different types of volunteer motivations so that you can really tailor the volunteering experience to these particular types of tutors. So we'll start with our personal social volunteers, our folks who are interested in helping others, who want to meet new people, maybe they have some free time. So we have some ideas for you. The first idea is that perhaps you might want to organize some sharing sessions amongst your tutors. This might look like resource sharing. This might look like some kind of best practice sharing. Some opportunity for your volunteers to come together, share their ideas, problem solve, talk about their challenges, talk about their strengths. These might be volunteers who particularly are interested in social events. So this might look like a tutor's night out. This might look like some kind of tutor celebration, some way that you can bring your tutors together to socialize, to talk, to get to know each other. Perhaps a volunteer lounge is something that you might be able to offer, a space for volunteers to come before or after their tutoring sessions to talk, to get to know one another. This might be as simple as providing coffee for your volunteers, offering them a space to relax, drink a cup of coffee, and kind of get to know each other, to reflect, to talk. Another idea is that you might think about inviting some of your tutors to some agency-wide events, really having them be a part of your organization, your agency, letting them get to know some of the other people who work at your organization. And then finally, Literacy Works offers all kinds of opportunities for tutors to come together, socialize, share ideas, problem solve. So for example, we offer in the fall and spring literacy forums and literacy roundtables, as well as throughout the year, a whole host of special topics trainings that really focus on the tutor and their needs. Now, for your volunteers who you know are really motivated by career reasons, right? So these are the folks who want to build their resume. These are the folks who are looking to gain some experience in the field. There are a few different things that you might want to think about doing as a coordinator to really cater to these guys. This might look like new responsibilities. So perhaps you would like to offer these tutors a little extra responsibilities. Perhaps they might be your volunteer who could organize some kind of sharing session or resource sharing or best practice sharing session. These might be volunteers who can assist teachers in the classroom. A really great role for these is to involve them in the day-to-day work that's going on at your agency. Another idea is to offer them some leadership opportunities. So they might be able to help you lead a book club, lead some small groups, help with some of the reporting that goes on at your agency, really take on more of an active leadership role in your program. These are also tutors who would benefit from some deeper resources. So as a coordinator, you might want to reach out to these volunteers and provide them with some more resources about tutoring, about the field, information about their learners, for example. Additionally, just offering to be a reference to these folks would be really helpful, because if you know that somebody is interested in getting into the field, well, then you can really provide them some mentorship, offer to be a reference, and really help them along in their career. And then finally, just lots of conversations about the field, really open up their eyes to what's going on, different experiences that they might have to help them out in their career. So finally, the third type of volunteer is this community cause volunteer, this person who's really motivated by community change, who really wants to make their neighborhood or their community a better place. What are some of the things that you can do as the literacy coordinator to help sort of tailor their experience to these types of motivations? You know, this is all about sharing community information. You're an expert on your community. So with your community cause volunteer, lots of conversations about what's going on in the community, what strengths the community has, what are some of the weaknesses. This might be a really great volunteer to lead some community action. So for example, this might be a great person to lead a voter drive at your organization, perhaps a letter writing campaign. So we know at nonprofits, budgets are tight, literacy coordinators wear a million different hats, you always have so many different things to do. Why not try to put some of the advocacy work onto a community cause volunteer who might be able to lead some of these things that you just can't do? And then, thinking about this really driven volunteer who believes in social justice, why not use that as a consideration in tutor student matching? So as literacy coordinators, you often have students who can be really tough to match. Maybe they're very slow learners. They take a long time to increase a grade level, for example. Well, this might be a really great match for them because a community cause volunteer is someone who's really driven by this idea that people need to learn to read, for example, or people should have the right to read. Why not match that type of person with a learner who has some of the more special needs? You might find that this volunteer is more patient, is more willing to spend time, and might be a really good match for this type of student. So we talk a lot about why volunteers are coming to us, but I also want you to think about for a minute, what do our volunteers sacrifice to be at our organizations? What are they giving up every day to come and within our programs? So if you look on the first page of your packet, you'll see this question: what do volunteers sacrifice? And why don't you just take a couple minutes to jot down any ideas that you can think of. If you need to pause, go ahead and do that now. Okay. So as you can see from the pictures here on the screen, some of our ideas or some of the thoughts that we have about volunteers is that they're giving up free time. They're giving up time with friends and family. Oftentimes they are spending money, right, to get to your organization, transportation, parking, supplies, right? There's a lot of things that volunteers are giving up to be there. And it's so important as a literacy coordinator, you're thinking about these things and you're recognizing what the sacrifices are as well as what the motivations are. So we've talked about this idea of why our volunteers are here. Now we kind of want to dig a little bit deeper and talk about some really specific tutor recruitment strategies. So like I mentioned earlier, so much of what we're using in today's webinar are really things that we've gotten from you guys in the field, right? You're the experts. And so we're just kind of compiling them all together to share. For those of you who are more seasoned coordinators, there might be many things that you're already doing. For those newer coordinators, a lot of these things might be new to you. Either way, can get you to think about some of these things maybe in a new way. Maybe we can push you to think about some of these strategies a little bit differently. And we're hoping that you can get some new ideas and some new ways of doing things out of this webinar. So volunteer recruitment. There's so many different strategies, so many different ways that literacy coordinators are bringing volunteers into their agency. And we know that this is not just a one-time thing, right? This doesn't happen one time a year. This is happening all the time. Really good literacy coordinators are recruiting volunteers everywhere they go with every interaction that they have. Before we jump into the strategies, I want to bring up this idea of recruiting to diversify your tutor base. What do we mean by diversifying your tutor base? Many organizations tend to rely on one particular type of tutor for all of their tutoring needs. So for example, we've seen some organizations who have a lot of college students, right? And these students are great because they're super enthusiastic, they want to be there, but they can only stay for 6 months, for example. Other organizations will rely on maybe retired people, older people, and these volunteers are super persistent. They stay for years and years and years. They have really wonderful long-time tutor-learner matches, but maybe they're less flexible. They're less willing to change. So when we think about recruiting to diversify our tutor base, we're thinking about all the different ways that we can bring diversity into our tutors, and we can sort of balance out our tutor base. So we have ideas. For example, you might diversify your tutor base to bring in new kinds of talents, right? Persistence levels. Tutors who stay for a short amount of time versus tutors who can stay for a bit longer. Matching is another important thing to consider, right? We don't have a singular monolith learner base. We have a diverse learner base, so therefore we should also have a diverse tutor base. And then, like I mentioned before, balance, right? To have a really strong balance of different types of tutors. So before we jump into some of our recruitment strategies, I just want you to turn the page, look on the next page of your handout, and look at the checklist of all the different recruitment strategies. Go through and just check off any of those ways that you recruit volunteers, as well as writing any other ideas that you have at the bottom of the page. If you need a minute, pause here. If not, we'll jump back in about 5 seconds or so. Okay. So we want to break down tutor recruitment into two sort of distinct categories that we're calling direct tutor recruitment and indirect tutor recruitment. Direct tutor recruitment is really a call for volunteers, okay? And this is the more traditional way that we see tutor recruitment done. It's very common to, for example, put out a print, electronic, or even face-to-face message from the literacy organization saying, we need tutors. Now, the indirect tutor recruitment is a little bit different. This is really building partnerships, leveraging networks to gain new tutors without, for example, putting out the call for new tutors. Direct tends to be a little bit quicker. It tends to be maybe a little bit easier, whereas the indirect tutor recruitment, this is the stuff that takes time, it takes relationship building, and this is the stuff that's a little bit harder to do. So we're going to push you to think a little bit more intentionally about both your direct recruitment and also your indirect recruitment. Direct recruiting, like I said, involves print and electronic and face-to-face types of recruiting. So we're going to start with this print and electronic. This looks at flyers, signs, print ads, websites, social media, many of these things that you are already doing at your organization. So let's start with flyers. Now, we talked earlier about volunteer motivation. Why are our volunteers coming to us to tutor? Well, if you take a look at the two example flyers on your screen, you'll see that both are flyers for the Illinois Adult Learning Hotline, but both are targeting a different type of volunteer motivation. So if you look at the flyer on your left, you'll see the big title, Help Your Community. This flyer is really specifically targeting a community cause volunteer. Whereas if you look at the resume on your right, you'll see the title, Build Your Resume. Who is this targeting? This is targeting a career volunteer. So what we really want to do is to push you to think a little bit differently about the flyer that you're currently using. Oftentimes, agencies have a flyer that they developed 10 years ago. It looked good at the time. You're still using it today. It's one size fits all. Think about, well, what are some of the ways that you can revamp your flyer, that we can help you think about different flyers for different purposes, different flyers for different volunteers. If you take a look at page 3 in your handout packet, you'll see the flyer that we've got on the screen. So this is just an example flyer that we've put together, and we think this is just a really nice model to think about kind of updating your flyer, making it really clear and readable. So as you can see on the right hand side of your screen, we just have some tips for flyer development. Large font, really easy to read. It's a good idea to have a nice image that sort of gives the message, shows you exactly what's going to be happening in a tutoring session. Your text is brief, direct, clear, easy to understand. You have all the information that you need. So many times we'll see flyers that are missing key information. Bold, simple design, and very importantly, a clean, straight copy. Okay, so we don't want a copy that's been, duplicated zillions and zillions of times. We want something that really shows that we've put some time and some effort and some thought into our flyer, just like we will our volunteers. Another thing to think about when you're thinking about flyers is where should you post them? So when I was a coordinator, I had sort of my main places that I always put my flyers. I always went to the library on the corner. I always went to the subway up the street. And so those places may or may not be places where volunteers potentially hang out, but it's a really good idea to kind of think a little bit more strategically. So if I'm interested in getting more younger volunteers from a university, for example, well, then it's important that I go to the university and I post my flyers there, right? If I'm interested in getting more people from my community, then I might want to think about posting my flyer in some community locations, like a bookstore or a restaurant or a library or another community center. Strategic thinking will really help you think about volunteer diversification and think about getting volunteers who are at your agency for all kinds of different reasons. Another thing to think about is look in your community for places that you notice other flyers, right? So if you see a bulletin board that you've never noticed before, well, why not add your agency's flyer there? You might also consider signs and print ads. So these are things that I think a lot of people are doing a little bit less, but signs, I mean, this is key real estate. Posting a big sign that says volunteers needed on your door, on the door of your agency, or maybe a window that's visible from the street so that when folks are walking by, they can say, oh, there's a volunteer opportunity. I had no idea that existed. I'm interested. I'm going to go on inside. I think when I was a coordinator, so many people became volunteers simply because they lived in the neighborhood. They walked by and they thought, I want to get involved in this organization. Print ads in places like Streetwise, The Reader, different kinds of free print resources are also a really good place to think about posting your information. Volunteer websites. So again, I think a lot of organizations are using volunteer websites like volunteermatch.org, idealist.org. These are free opportunities for you to tell all about your tutoring opportunity to a wider audience. These are also a really great way to attract some younger volunteers, some people who are maybe a little bit more computer savvy, who look for their volunteering opportunities on the computer as opposed to flyers or print ads. If you don't use these websites, it's really best practice to just go through, check out some of the other volunteer opportunities, find a model that you really like for a job description or a volunteer description, and then kind of model your description off of that. In addition to volunteer websites, it's also so important that you have your volunteering opportunity on your agency's website. So this is something that I often see literacy programs not doing. But for many people, if you have a potential volunteer who's sort of interested in your community center, interested in your agency, they don't know about the adult literacy program, when they're browsing through the website, they might see a big, get involved or volunteer with us button. They'll click on it and they'll learn about the volunteering opportunity. So this is an example from the Albany Park Community Center. Really nice, clear picture that gives the potential volunteer an idea of what the volunteering opportunity will look like, as well as a nice job description that lists out some of the responsibilities and duties of a volunteer tutor. If you'll see at the bottom, there's some clear contact information. Now, this is specific contact information for the current literacy coordinator. Some organizations who have a lot of turnover, perhaps AmeriCorps are staffing the coordinator position, they might not want to put a name on their website. Some organizations, it can be tough to update websites. You have a person in a different office managing your website. So in that case, it's probably a good idea at blah, 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 or the phone number on the website so that you don't have to worry about it getting updated as somebody new comes into your position. I have also seen volunteer forms right on the website so that if you have a volunteering opportunity, a volunteer comes, finds your website, they can fill out the form right there. It gets emailed to the literacy coordinator. You have all of their information, give them a call, get them in. So that's another really good way to recruit volunteers straight from your website. And then additionally, there are agency Facebook pages. So social media is a very powerful tool for spreading the message of volunteering. This is the Indo-American Center's Facebook page. And as you can see, someone who might be visiting IAC's social media page could see this post about becoming a volunteer within adult literacy. So as an adult literacy coordinator, see if you can get access to your larger agency's Facebook page, put some posts up regularly that show what an awesome opportunity volunteering at your agency will be, how to contact you, what you need, etc. In addition to print, electronic, and social media direct recruiting, there's also face-to-face recruiting, right? Talking to someone, telling them organization about your volunteering opportunity. So this is talking to folks. This is giving presentations. This is setting up recruiting tables at different kinds of fairs. Now, you can see here, this is an example of a recruiting table at a local college. Recruiting tables are such an awesome opportunity to reach people because you're really speaking to them face to face. You're able to tell them about the opportunity, what a wonderful set of learners you have, what kinds of needs you have, and you can really hook people that way. Recruiting tables might also happen at art fairs, for example. Community Chicago in the summer is full of different kinds of community festivals. Why not set up a table and try to recruit some new volunteers there? Whenever you are setting up a recruitment table, it's also a good idea to think about recruiting adult learners, because oftentimes at the community fairs, for example, you're going to have a whole wide range of people coming and going. So you might recruit some learners as well as some potential volunteers. So in addition to this direct recruiting, I also want to talk about this idea of indirect recruiting. So this is recruiting that happens through individual and community partnerships and networks. This is the stuff that takes a little bit more time, is harder to develop, but might really reap some long-term dedicated volunteers. So community partnerships, what are they? These are partnerships that your literacy program might forge with local colleges or universities, for example, libraries. This is faith communities like churches or temples or different sort of faith communities in your neighborhood. Social justice organizations might be really interested in building a partnership with your organization. Civic representatives, these are people like aldermen, leaders in your neighborhood, as well as possibly just neighborhood meeting places like bookstores, community centers, restaurants, sort of any organization within your community who might become a potential pipeline for volunteers. Through partnering, you can reach people, right? So the idea is that you're building this partnership so that you can really talk to so many more people than you would be able to on your reach more people through face-to-face, newsletters. You can see an example here, emails, things like that. What can partners do for you? I mean, there's a whole host of things that building these partnerships might be able to do. They might be able to simply hang your flyers, manpower, right? Share your posts on social media. So if you have an awesome post about volunteers needed, well, then the local university might also be able to share that post and reach a wider range of audience. You might be able to present directly to folks from that organization so that you can recruit some people that way. These partnerships might also be able to refer volunteers to you. So if they find that they have some people really interested in, becoming tutors, giving back to their community, if you've built a partnership, they might be able to send their volunteers to you. And then it serve as a satellite tutoring site, right? If you have a lot of tutors aren't available during your open hours, who live further away, maybe building a partnership might be able to help with some off-site tutoring opportunities, as well as just providing resources, monetary resources, support, all kinds of additional resources that you can leverage through these partnerships. Now, how do you do this? So this is really the big question. Partnerships, it seems easy. You build a partnership with the local university. You build this partnership with the local library. I think, if you have any experience as a literacy coordinator, you've likely tried this. It can be really tough. So first of all, we are going to recommend that you meet face-to-face with whoever you're trying to partner with. So this is probably going to take a little sleuth work. You're going to have to go onto the agency website, figure out exactly who you want to be meeting with, make some telephone calls, send them some emails. You might have to do it a couple of times until you're able to set up a face-to-face meeting. During the face-to-face meeting, you'll want to tell them about all of the awesome volunteer opportunities that how you help your community, what types of volunteers you're looking for, what kinds of experiences you might be able to provide those volunteers with. And you really want to try to sell your organization so that this partnership can begin to build. Now, once you've built the initial partnership, you have to nurture it. So there's real maintenance that has to happen. This is going to happen through telephone calls, check-ins, emails, right? Lots of communication back and forth so that you're able to maintain this relationship with this other organization. When you're partnering, it can be difficult. So you have to hang in there. Keep reaching out, call, email, face-to-face. Really try to just keep going, keep pushing forward, keep trying to build this partnership. Reciprocation is also so important. So what can you offer this partner, right? Because if they're becoming a pipeline of volunteers to you, you want to think about all the ways that you can help them to make this a balanced partnership. And then just keeping your eyes open. Stay on the lookout for new potential partners, right? Because it's all about building as many powerful and prosperous partnerships as you can. Additionally, it's so, so important to leave a partnership legacy. We know that in these positions, so many coordinators come and go. There's a lot of turnover. Many positions are. If you build a partnership time as coordinator, it's also really important that you're leaving a legacy. You're recording all of this information, including contact information, activities that you've done with the partner, so that whoever comes in after you can see all of this and can move forward instead of having to start all over again. And then finally, when we're talking about indirect recruiting, we're also talking about this idea of leveraging individual networks. So sometimes the best way to get new volunteers and new tutors is by word of mouth, is current tutors who've had such an awesome experience, who love your organization, who love their learners, that they're able to recommend friends to bring into the agency. Staff are another really awesome way to leverage networks, as well as board members. Okay, so we've talked all about all kinds of different recruitment strategies. We're now going to move into some retention strategies. You have all of these potential tutors who are here, who are excited about your tutoring opportunity. Well, how do you keep them? So we have sort of 6 main points that we're going to move through, starting with really understanding volunteer interests, setting expectations, making good matches, providing lots of training, lots of support, regular communication, and then recognition. Okay, so the first is really about volunteer motivation. As a literacy coordinator, it is so important that you can really understand your volunteer interests, understand their motivations. So if you have a new volunteer who comes to you and says, I want to promote equality, you can know right away, this is a community cause volunteer. And this volunteer might really love to, for example, lead some kind of community action. Perhaps you have a volunteer who comes to you and says, I'm new to the neighborhood. I just want to meet some new people. Well, this is your personal social volunteer. This is an individual who would really benefit from some kind of social activities that you can provide them. This is a person who might do well with a group of learners, perhaps. Maybe you have a volunteer who comes to you and says, I'm here to build my resume. I want to get some new skills. Okay, this is a career volunteer. This is someone who you can really help nurture professionally, who you can guide, who you can mentor. So how do we start to understand tutor interest? How do we get to those volunteer motivations? If you look on the next page of your handout, this is pages 4 and 5, we're providing for you some questions for tutor recruits. Now, on the left hand of your packet, you'll see that these are interview questions. So you might think about using these when you have your new volunteers come in, give them a volunteer interview. You might ask them some of these questions on the left-hand side of the page. If you look on the right-hand side of the page, on page 5, you'll notice a rubric. This is something that you might include in your volunteer application, for example. This is more of a written interest form. Either way, it's really important that as you meet your new volunteers, as you get to know them, as you start listening to them, you have some time set aside where you're able to ask them and to find out, why are they here? What do they want to get out of this experience? In addition to thinking about motivations and interests, it's also really important that right away, as a coordinator, you think about some of the challenges that your agency may offer, some of the challenges that your student population may offer. So I want to do another reflection. You can turn the page in your handout packet. This is page 6, and you'll notice this question: what might be tough for volunteers at your program? What are some of the barriers that you see might arise, or some of the challenges that they might face volunteering at your organization? So take a couple seconds, jot down some ideas. If you need a little bit more time, if you need to reflect a little bit more, remember you can pause and start back up again. Okay, so all agencies are different, but there may be that your agency has some particular challenges that might be difficult, that might challenge tutor motivation. So for example, parking might be a real issue. If you have an agency that does not have ready parking or readily available parking, that might be a concern for some of your volunteers. And it's important that you know that right up front. Facilities might be an issue. Many literacy programs, as we know, have sort of older facilities. They're not state-of-the-art, brand new, and that might be something that might be difficult for some of your tutors, something that you might have to really think about when you're attracting volunteers. Another issue might be, for example, record keeping. Different organizations have different requirements for record keeping, but many literacy coordinators would prefer that their volunteers are recording their volunteering activities. If, for example, you want a volunteer to do this digitally, that might be a challenge for some volunteers who are not as computer savvy. Another issue might be as simple as meeting space. So some volunteers might go into volunteering thinking that they'll get their own classroom or their own office. But as we know, space can be really tight, and you might have one room for 10 tutor-student matches. So that's something that you want to think about right up front and mention and talk about with your potential volunteers, because all of these different kinds of challenges at the agency might really challenge a volunteer's motivation, might make it more difficult for them to get what they want and they need out of that tutoring experience. Additionally, it is so important that you set really strong, clear expectations at the beginning of the volunteer experience. And so this sort of goes back to what we've just been talking about potential challenges. But it's just so important that your volunteers know right up front what the experience is going to look like and what is expected of them. One way that you can do this, if you look at the next page in your handout, this is page 7, you'll see an example of a volunteer tutor description. And so this is a volunteer job description. This very clearly lays out all the roles, all the responsibilities of a volunteer tutor. This is something that you might include, for example, on the website. This is something that might go into a volunteer description on Idealist or Volunteer Match. This is something that you might email out to a volunteer before they come and meet with you for the first time. At the very latest, you're going to want to provide this to your volunteer when you sit down with them and talk to them the first time. Additionally, on the next page, page 8, you'll see a volunteer tutor agreement form. So this is a contract that you create with your volunteer tutor. And this really clearly lays out all of the things that you expect from the volunteer tutor, as well as all of the things that the volunteer tutor can expect from you, the literacy coordinator, and the organization. So as you'll see at the top, these are the responsibilities that you're making or that you're setting up as the coordinator. These are the things that my literacy program agrees to. At the bottom, you have a whole list of different responsibilities that you expect of your volunteer tutor. So earlier we talked about this idea of digital record keeping, for example. If you want all of your volunteer tutors to record their tutoring sessions via Google Drive, well then here's the place that you're going to list that, right? As a volunteer tutor, I agree to digital record keeping via Google Drive or something like that. And so this is the place when you can sit down with your potential volunteer and make an agreement about what this is going to look like, what is expected of them, and what will happen in their tutoring sessions. By doing this now, you're really setting yourself up for a really good, healthy working relationship with your volunteer tutors. So in addition to setting expectations for your tutor and for yourself, it's also so important to set up expectations for your students. So many literacy coordinators have had the experience of having learners who don't show up for their tutoring sessions or show up 30 minutes late. And this is really frustrating for the volunteer tutor. Before you place a match, it's really important that your learners understand exactly who the volunteer is, what they're sacrificing to be there, the fact that they're not getting paid to be there, and just really clearly understanding what the relationship is between the volunteer tutor and the learner. Another thing that you can do to sort of help these expectations is filling out this tutor match communication preferences worksheet. So this is the next page in your packet. This is page 9. And this is something that as a literacy coordinator, you can sit down with a new tutor learner match, maybe on their first day, and you can help them fill this out together. This is all about communication preferences. So is it okay to call me? Is it okay to text me? What's my phone number? What's my email address? If you can set these expectations really early on, you can avoid things where, the student is texting the tutor while they're driving to your agency, or the learner not showing up or showing up super late and the tutor not knowing where they are. When you finish filling out this communication preferences form, you as a literacy coordinator make a copy of it, put it in the student file, give a copy to each individual so that they're very clear on what the expectations are regarding communication and the relationship that the tutor and the student are building. In addition to this idea of expectations, it's also really important on your end as the literacy coordinator to make good matches. So many times I've seen literacy coordinators making matches based on convenience. I have a new tutor, I have a student who needs a tutor, put them together, right? But there are so many things that are really important to think about before making learner-tutor matches. And so what I want to do now is really have you think about all of the intentional ways that you can match learners and tutors together. So on the next page, page 10, you'll see a question. I want you to just jot down some ideas here about what you consider when you match your tutors and your learners. So what are some of the techniques? What are some of the strategies? What are some of the things that you're thinking about as you're matching during the matching process? Take a minute, write down your ideas. We'll come back. If you need more time, pause now. Okay, so there are a million different things to think about. And some of these things you may have listed, some of these things may be new to you. What makes a good tutor match? I'm not here to say that there's a particular formula or a particular way that you can match tutors and students. However, here are some things to think about. So gender is something to consider, right? If you have, for example, a learner who is female, is very religious, it might be a good idea to think about matching her with a female tutor, for example. Perhaps you have a learner who is young. This learner might have a preference of working with someone older than them because they would feel more comfortable. Perhaps on the other hand, this learner might want to work with someone who's the same age as them because they feel like that would be more appropriate. These are things that you should think about as you're matching your learners and your tutors. Personality is another thing to think about, right? So if you have someone who's really outgoing, it might be a good idea to think about matching them with another really gregarious learner. Goals. So what are this person's goals? How fast do they want to get there? Sometimes we have impatient tutors. And so we might want to match sort of an impatient tutor with someone who we know is going to make a lot of progress real quick. On the other hand, maybe we have a learner who's very slow, who needs a lot of patience. This might be a good fit for a more patient learner who doesn't have these types of really lofty goals. Scheduling is another obvious thing to consider. Lots of other things that you can think about, but I want to push you now to just think in the future about how you can be really intentional when you're matching your learners to your tutors. In addition to matching, to really building a strong partnership, it is so important that you provide your tutors with ongoing training and support, really developing them professionally so that they feel like they can do the best possible job as a tutor. So this starts with a core training. Literacy Works provides a 12-hour training that gives tutors the basics that they need to work with adult learners, to work on reading, writing, speaking, listening, phonics, all of these really important things. So starting off with the core training before they meet with a student is a really good way to ground them in some foundational pedagogy. In addition, it's very important to provide your own orientation to your organization, to your literacy program, to your library, to your resources, to the space, making sure that your tutor feels really prepared in your space, knows where to go, knows where to access resources, and can really have a healthy, nurturing relationship with their learner in your space. In addition to sort of this foundational beginning training and support, ongoing professional development is so important. Literacy Works offers special topics trainings throughout the year on a whole variety of topics. And these are really meant to deepen the knowledge of your tutors, as well as to keep them excited, keep them learning, give them all kinds of things that they can take back to their organization and use with their learners right away. Literacy Works sends out all kinds of flyers all the time. Forward these flyers to your tutors. Forward all the opportunities that you see, because tutors are hungry for this stuff. They want to learn more. They want to participate, and they can't do that if you're not making sure that they're getting all the information that they need. In addition, you can bring Literacy Works to your site. We do fee-based on-site training on a variety of ESL, ABE workforce topics. If you're interested in something like this, check out our website. You can contact us, and we'd be very happy to talk to you about all of these different kinds of opportunities. Online resources. This is another way you can really support your tutor. So online resources are available at the Literacy Works webpage. You can see under Teaching Adults, we have a whole host of really awesome resources for your tutors, as well as a Pinterest page. There's all kinds of stuff on the web. It's great to share it regularly with your tutors so that they feel like they're really being supported. Another really important part of tutor retention is regular communication, regular meetings, regular check-ins to let your tutors know that you care about their sessions, you're interested, you're there to problem solve, you're there to help them out. So before we sort of talk about all the different ways that you can communicate with your volunteers, I want you to just think for a second. We'll take a quick minute, and I want you to write down some of the ways that you communicate with your volunteers. Okay, so you may have written face-to-face. Regular check-ins after your volunteer tutors are done with their tutoring sessions. Some of you might communicate with your tutors via phone. Others might primarily use email. Some of you might even text your tutors regularly to check in, to communicate, to give them information. All of these are really awesome ways to just stay in touch, make sure that you're invested, make sure that your tutors know that you're there, and make sure that you're really sort of knowing what's going on a daily basis with your volunteers. Another really awesome way to communicate with your tutors is through a newsletter. So as you can see, this is the Annexter Center's Literacy Ledger, which is a really cool bi-monthly publication that goes out to tutors across the agency. So this has all kinds of really cool features, including the Match Spotlight, which highlights a volunteer tutor and learner, lots of resources, upcoming events. This is a great way to communicate with all of your tutors at the same time, and also show your tutors that you're taking the time to build a newsletter for them because you want to communicate with them and you want them to feel like they're part of a community of tutors. Social media is another awesome way to communicate. So This is the Howard Area Community Center's adult education page, and this is really used to talk about upcoming events, highlight resources, share tutor learner spotlights, as you can see at the right-hand corner of your screen. Just highlight all the cool stuff going on at the Howard Area Community Center. You'll also see here we have the Aquinas Literacy Center, which has a wonderful social media page or a wonderful Facebook page that shares sort of what's going on a Wednesday night with your tutoring pairs. Literacy Volunteers of Western Cook County have a congratulations for a tutor learner pair, showing that these are the learner of the month and the tutor of the month. Finally, the last thing that is so important for you to retain your tutors is this idea of recognition and celebration, making sure that your tutors know how much you appreciate them, how much you recognize all of their really hard work, and how much you celebrate that hard work and all of the progress they're making with their learners, because we know that without these tutors, our programs would not exist. So recognition, you can do this in a whole bunch of different ways. You know, this might look really formal with certificates and recognition ceremonies. This might be a little bit less formal. This might be bulletin boards. So this is the Delta Literacy Project's awesome bulletin board that recognizes some of the hard work of the tutors at Delta. In addition to recognizing your tutors, celebrations are so important. They're such a fun way for tutors to get to know each other. If you have a whole bunch of personal social tutors, this is a really great opportunity for you to bring them together, to socialize, to celebrate their work. Celebrations look different at every agency based on agency culture, based on tutor-learner culture, but there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can celebrate the hard work of your learners. So lastly today, I want to just sort of briefly wrap up with the role of the volunteer coordinator. So what is your role in all of this? We've talked about volunteer motivation. We've talked about some recruitment strategies. We've talked about some retention strategies. Well, where do you come in? So we're sort of breaking it down into these 4 pieces. We think that these are the 4 kinds of ways that you really do these things. You welcome, right? You're the face of your organization. You're the first person that your volunteer tutors meet. You're the person who draws them in and makes them want to volunteer at your organization. You inform them, right? You tell them all about your organization. You tell them about Literacy Works. You tell them about adult literacy in Chicago. You inform them about their learners, about what they'll be doing. You connect them. So you connect them to your learner. You connect them with other tutors. You connect them with folks at your agency, with the greater Chicago literacy community. And you also communicate with them regularly, phone, email, face-to-face, newsletters, social media, all kinds of ways that you can keep them connected and keep them really feeling like they're part of this community. So we know that literacy coordinators have a whole bunch of responsibilities. And we also know that so many literacy coordinators are also teaching, are also writing grants, are also keeping all of their records up to date, are also doing needs assessments, are also doing all kinds of social work activities. And so we just want to recognize here that there are so many things that you have to be doing as a literacy coordinator. And we understand that. And we know that you guys are all working so hard. Sometimes it probably feels like, oh my God, how can I do it all? But we're hoping that today we've offered you maybe some new strategies, some new ways to think about your work that'll help you streamline some of your processes, make it easier for you. So you can find resources about managing a literacy program at the Literacy Works webpage, www.litworks.org. We have all kinds of really super awesome resources for you. Please stay in touch after you're finished with this webinar. We'd love to hear any questions that you have for us, any comments, any ways that we can improve this experience for you. info@litworks.org. And we're so happy that you joined us for this webinar, that you made it all this way. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know. I hope that you learned some new things and that you're able to go back to your organizations and really take some new strategies with you. So thank you so much.